So we are doing the rapid survey of the second canto last time, but one part was missing. We could not cover it last time. The last 72 lines plus Narad's departure. So we'll quickly run through them first and then see some related issues of Narad's visit to Ashwapati's palace. In fact, that is a big topic by itself and it can go on for months, but we'll just try to quickly run through some of the aspects. Queen, strive no more to change the secret will. Of course, this is addressed to one who is representative of the mortal being, the Queen. She is representative on our behalf. And it is to us, therefore, Narad is saying, look, you have absolutely no place in the design of things which have already been planned for Savitri. The best thing is you please stand aside and let things move as they should move. Strive no more to change the secret will. Secret will is, of course, not for Narad, it is for us, for the mortal. And we really don't know what is behind the whole thing, behind the whole affair, you see. In fact, this gives us also a clue about the purpose of Narad's visit. Why should he come here at all, you see? It is in the context of the secret will that he is making this trip to Ashwapati's palace. He is aware of it, he feels a kind of a commitment to participate in that secret will, and therefore he comes here. Which also means that whether you like it or not, it is bound to be this way. One can go a step further. Whether Narad comes or not, this is bound to be so. Whether he visits Ashwapati's palace, whether he talks about the doomed fate of Satyavan and all that, is all inconsequential. The secret will has already decided that this is how it will be. Those who are willing to participate, they will be the joyous, happy participants of the whole event. And Narad sees a kind of glory in that participation, a celebration in the secret will, and therefore he comes here. See. So whether Narad comes or not, this is bound to happen. In fact, that is what we'll discuss a little more in detail later on. Bring not thy brief and helpless human tears, etc., that we already seen. Alone, she is equal to her mighty task. That is why she has come here. And she has come fully prepared to measure up to the mighty task. What she has to do, she is going to accomplish. So again, we see here, whether Narad comes or not, this is bound to happen. She is there to meet, to face death, to complete, fulfill the mighty task. And then of course we have got the famous simile here, as a star and companion moves in heaven, unastonished by the immensities of space, traveling infinity by its own light, traveling infinity by its own light. The immensity of space, the measurelessness of the cosmic extensions, they do not create any awe in the soul of the star, in Savitri. And she is there to travel the entire immensity of space. And then he summarizes the great are strongest when they stand alone. We have seen already that Savitri is one among those great. And when they are not strongest, when they stand alone. They stand alone, of course, in the sense that there is no human help. There is no cosmic help. There is no help from the gods also. If at all any help is to come, that help will come directly from their divine soul. Savitri will receive whatever help she wants from her soul in the transcendent, from the Supreme Himself. And in that sense, she will stand alone. A God-given might or being is their force. And then, of course, he makes the prophetic lines here. A day may come when she must stand unhelped on a dangerous brink of the world's doom and hers. Well, world's doom, understandable, but it is also going to be her doom. It is also going to be her doom. Why doom? Because Nara does not know what will be the actual consequence of this entire engagement, of this development. She may fail, she may succeed, and therefore there is that element of precariousness in the entire operation. Why? Because Savitri has taken human birth. It is through her human birth she has to do whatever she has come here to do. Being that human element in her, she has to meet doom. She has to face doom. He says again, to conquer or fail, that we already said last time, many times we have seen. He says, earlier he says, a day may come, all that thing, that subjective element is there in all his statements. But then finally, she must cross alone a perilous bridge in time. The perilous bridge from time to timelessness. She has to cross that alone. Where all is one, all is lost. All is lost, not for her, but for man. For man. She has nothing to lose. Whatever she is going to do, it is for man. In the tremendous silence, lone and lost of a deciding hour in the world's fate, deciding hour of the world's fate. So that's the most crucial juncture in the eons of earthly time, of the yugas of time, cycles of time, This is the most crucial juncture, and that is why Narad feels kind of compelled to come and do his bit. Whether he comes or not, this is bound to happen. If not Narad, by some other mechanism, things will be got done. But this is bound to happen. It is not like the plan of a CEO in an office that, well, if this plan doesn't work, we'll go by this plan, or by this plan, or by this plan, you see. He may have priorities for this or for this or for this, you see. But here, when such a crucial decision has been taken to this mortal birth, as if everything has been prearranged, it has got to be so. Whether Narad comes or not is immaterial. In fact, that is what we'll discuss in more detail also later on. Alone she must conquer, or alone must fall. This word alone, etc., we are seeing, he is repeating it on and off and off, you see, more and more regularly, you see. Constantly he is repeating this word. Because it is she alone who can do that thing. He has seen some kind of a uniqueness in the birth of Savitri, in the divine power, in divine force, divine Shakti taking this birth. And it is she alone who can do that, the divine Shakti herself, who has taken the mortal birth. O Queen, stand back from that stupendous scene. Poor lady, she was already very far away from Madura, from Shalva Woods, when this event was going to take place. She was in Madura, and this is going to happen in the Shalva Woods. So she is really standing back far away from the scene, you see, physically also, you see. Stand back from that stupendous scene. The stupendous scene in the Shalva forest, the destined meeting place and the destined hour, they are already fixed, and they are not at all close to Madra, you see. She is standing back helplessly. But psychologically also, he is telling her, look, although physically you are not present there, psychologically also, you have no place there at all. You had to keep away from all that thing, you see. In other words, if at all you want to help her, prepare yourself in such a way that she gets the divine force through many channels. Savitri is there, her mother is in Madura. What can her mother do there? She can pray to the Divine Mother. Tell her, look, this is what is going to happen. I am helpless, and whatever has got to be done, it will be only through you. So she can pray to her. That is the best she can do. Otherwise, she has no place at all, you see. Her hour must come, and none can intervene. In fact, he says, thou hast no place in the stupendous strife, you see. He is simply dismissing her.
It's really hard for her to take
It's
it.
very hard, you see. He is forthright, blunt, you see. Yeah. Thy love and longing are not arbitrous there. Leave the world's fate and her to God's soul guard. So if you want to really help her, you go and sit in the meditation room or in the prayer room or whatever it be and pray for her soul, you see. Think not to intercede with a hidden will. Means the human element has absolutely no place in that. It does not mean that the human element cannot contribute in some manner with some positive feeling, perception toward this thing. If you are perceptive to higher possibilities, you simply say, Lord, this is what is going to happen. I don't know. I'm helpless. You please help her in whatever way you want to help her. That is all she can do, that thing. but I will not come in the way of what she is going to do.
This itself is a big help.
This is help, tremendous help, and that is the best the mortal can do. That is the best the mortal can do and should do. In fact, this is exactly also what we had to do in the family death occurs. And then you weep and cry and do this and do that. It's useless, meaningless. What you are supposed to do is you see in what manner you can help the departed. In what way you can make his journey after his life smooth, peaceful, quiet. That is the help you are supposed to give. See. But we cling to our own vital passions. In that process, in fact, what we are doing is we are dragging him back, the departed soul. It causes more suffering to the departed soul. We have to stand back and just pray for his welfare, for his good. I mean, we know that we cannot help it, but that is the best we should do. We should be able to do also. See. But leave her to her mighty self and fate. That is the final summary of Narad's visit to Madra. You see. Yes, she has come here. She has taken the mortal birth. She has come not by consulting you. She didn't consult you when she came here. She came with a purpose, she came with a mission. She will acquire whatever strength, power, yogic capacity required for that kind of thing. She will do that thing. She didn't ask for your consent to come here. She perhaps found something very suitable to take birth in your house. That's all. But beyond that, she has to do everything herself, you see. Her mighty self and fate. Now he says, Narad, mighty self. It is not human Savitri, but the divine Savitri who is housed in human Savitri. The divine Savitri who is housed in human Savitri. It is she who will do whatever has got to be done. She knows how to meet fate. So where are you? Where are we? Nowhere. And then he spoke and ceased and left the earthly scene. Now he is in a kind of a hurry to go back. Away from the strife and suffering on our mortal globe, he turned towards his far off blissful home, far off blissful home. This is in contrast with the suffering world in which we live. He is making it pointed that we are living in a sorrowful world. Narad is going back to his blissful world. Now, is Narad happy in his blissful world? Huh?
Yeah, he must be.
He should be.
Yeah, should be. Yeah,
He
I
should
think
be.
so.
Yeah.
Because he goes back there.
He should be happy. Look, now to
Otherwise
hell
he would
with you.
stay here, no?
To hell with you, let
He
me
would
go
stretch
back.
here and he would stay here, no?
Yeah.
He did whatever he could.
Huh?
He did whatever
Whatever
he
he could do. No. Well, what it means is that it is really, in a certain sense, very painful. Always a blissful world is a kind of a painful world also. Because what has happened is you got stuck. You are not able to progress. You are not able to progress. You live in the world of immortality, but you get stuck with that. The new dimensions of the spirits which should come in play, they are not coming out there. So in that sense, I don't think it's a very blissful world.
To progress, he has
Yeah.
Birth of
Yeah,
Christ.
exactly. He has to come here. He has to do things here. This is the place if you want to make progress. You see. This is the place. You see. So I think that way we are more fortunate than Narad that we are here.
But you can still make a choice and come back if you want.
If he wants. Yeah, if you want. If you want. That's right. That choice is there, and it entirely depends upon him to exercise that choice. You see. Maybe he is aware of it. Maybe he is waiting for an opportune moment. Maybe he is waiting for things to mature up for him to come here and take birth. He will come because he wants to make progress, you see. But at the moment, he's frozen. The world of the gods is a fixed, typal world. They are happy in their own merriment, but beyond that, nothing. They have to take the human birth to make progress. And that is what the mother always said. She asked Shiva, he says, no, I'm sorry, I don't want to go through all that process. When things are ready, then I will take birth. But she also said that Durga, she saw the wonder of surrender to the divine, and she surrendered to the divine. So that is the opening which is possible for that. But not there. By remaining there, okay, it's all right. A brilliant arrow pointing straight to heaven, the luminous body of the eternal seer, assailed the purple glory of the noon and disappeared like a receding star, vanishing to the light of the unseen. But still a cry was heard in the infinite, and still to the listening soul on mortal earth, a high and far imperishable voice chanted the anthem of eternal love. So that those vibrations of eternal love, they are still ringing in the sky. If we have ears to listen to them, we can hear the anthem of eternal love. If only we can open out our ears. If we develop that occult faculty of listening to the sounds of the ether, then we can hear that anthem of eternal love. Now, here we have very clear indication, very clear statement that he left at noon in the palace. We have seen that Narad must have come to the palace around 8 o'clock in the morning, and they had a session for about 4 hours with all those things. And after Narad's arrival at 8 o'clock, Savitri had come to the palace. Means she had entered the palace in the morning around 9 in the morning. Because immediately after Narad's visit to the palace, he sang to the royal parents for 1 hour about the lotus heart of love. He sang to them for 1 hour. So if he comes at 8 o'clock, he must be singing up to 9 o'clock, and then arrives Savitri. So in the company of Savitri, he was there for 3 hours. Now, if Savitri comes in the morning at 9 o'clock, we have already seen that after meeting Satyavan, she returns to the palace. She leaves the Shalva woods again at noon. She leaves at noon. That does not mean that from yesterday's noon till today's morning 9 o'clock she was traveling. In other words, it was not a journey of 21 hours. But it means that, you see, my feeling is that it must have taken a few weeks for her after meeting Satyavan to come back to this palace.
Because of that huge distance.
The huge distance and all that thing, you see. So that time we have to now bridge up how she would have traveled and that kind of. But one thing is certain: she is leaving at noon and reaching the palace at 9 in the morning. How many days in between, that we can't figure out from that. We can figure out to some extent in the sense that when Savitri left the palace, Red Ashoka saw her going out. When she entered the palace, again Red Ashoka sees her coming to the palace. Now, normally Ashoka blooms in February, March, April, summer time, you see, that time, red Ashoka, you see. So, it is possible that she was traveling for 1 year. Red Ashoka sees her going, red Ashoka sees her coming back. It is possible that she was traveling for 1 hour, for 1 year, you see, 1 year. And therefore, although she is in a hurry to come back to the palace, it must have definitely taken her a couple of weeks to come from Shalva Woods to Madra. Couple of weeks. Well, that is the best we can say about the geography of the whole place, of the travel, you see.